So, good morning, esteemed colleagues, friends, comrades, guests of the forum, and the participants of the forum. We will start our session. Our session is called Cooperation of Government and Business in the Digital Race. While preparing this event at the early stage, someone articulated in a very scientific manner the content of the discussion and the tasks that are set for the panelists. All those cross-platform solutions and other terms in the description. But we will simplify the paradigm of the discussion, and we'll talk about the relations of government, the state, and businesses in this digital race. Well, digital race is happening now across the world. Countries move forward in this direction, countries and companies with various speed. From one hand, it is important what governments are doing, how beneficial are the conditions for the companies and businesses in this digital race. And it is also important how successful the businesses are when participating in such digital race. And it is important how the two interact between each other. Who expects what from the other side, what businesses want from the state, what the state wants from businesses, how capable they are of maintaining the dialogue, how well they understand the motivation of each other, and how Russian companies can be successful in this digital race. These are the points for our discussion now. Now, in this forum, various important political events are evolving around that impact the structure of our panel. We plan to have Konstantin Noskov, minister. Now he's acting minister. Obviously, a lot of discussions and developments are revolving around the news. That's why he couldn't make it today and join our event. But we will try and make this discussion quite insightful and useful, and we have very interesting panelists today. They all have something to say on our subject, and I will introduce them one by one. We will give the floor to everyone, and then we will try and articulate specific points, and then probably we will have some time for a Q&A session with the audience. Probably we won't have this time at the end. It depends on how we move forward in the framework of the agenda of our session. So I suggest that we start. Since I've already opened the session, let's start with the panelist next to me, Tigran Khudaverdian, Managing Director of Yandex. Yandex is different because they've been digital for a long period of time. We are talking about digitalization, but Yandex is digital in its nature. That's the nature of their business. So could you please elaborate on what Yandex wants to see and expects from the government, the state, on various levels? And is there anything that can be digitalized in Yandex still? It is fully digital, it seems so, at least. Good morning. Well, indeed, it is very hard to speak about digital transformation, and the word digital, it is hard to articulate in any IT company because for many years it had different synonyms, and no one thought of Yandex as a non-digital company. And I think all colleagues face the same large and mid-size IT companies. But from the other hand, it is obvious that we are now in the era of large changes when everything related to technologies and IT, it is something which is relevant not only for groups of companies or a certain industry, but the whole world, all companies, all countries have to utilize technologies in their day-by-day work, in their management, in the management of the areas they're working in. And this changes the wider context. It means that since the industry is growing in its scope and it changes the competitive landscape and competition for talents, and it creates more a larger number of relations. So the more participants we have, the more relations we have. So the number of participants is growing. It means larger context of relations between participants of this landscape. So I have a metaphor for this. Investment funds, investors, they are investing into small startups, small companies, and at a point of time, I realized that a successful investor does not need all his startups to become Facebooks, but a successful investor needs just one startup to become Zuckerberg or Facebook in their area. And he or she has currency, has money, funds, he invests into companies and the rules of the game. Shareholders' agreement, which is signed between the parties, and it brings order into relations of the parties. But next, all those startups compete against each other and other competitors, and there are some cases when investors invest into competing companies, several competing companies, and investors really do not care sometimes who of them, what company will become the leader. And the same thing is expected from the country. Money in the hands of investors, in the context of the state, for instance, this can be regulation data. This is the currency the state has, and the state owns huge amounts of data. It can accumulate it or not, but hundreds and thousands of players in this market can utilize this data, have access, and compete against each other and grow their businesses. And similarly to the point of where investors and countries have a border between the two and they know what their position is, I think this looks similar to relations of countries, to attitude of countries towards this race that should be started by many companies now. Competition among companies and data, competition. So the currency of the country is the data of regulation. Am I clear for everyone? We should ask this question to the audience. I think yes, you're clear enough. So let's move on then. Next, Mikhail Asiyevsky, president of Rostelecom. This is a large company which is also going through transition period, and it transforms from traditional telecom, it used to be telecom company. In some sense, they are a digital partner for the population and the state, the government, and businesses who plan to create their own digital ecosystem. They are not the only company who are doing this, but one of the largest players in this market. That's why, Mikhail, please, the floor is yours. Good morning, dear friends. Well, thinking on the subject of our today's event, I realized that it should not be defined by it cannot be defined through simple words, because the landscape of interaction of businesses and countries in this digital world is very diverse. And here we have high-speed roads and smaller roads and rivers and mountains, and that's the landscape businesses interact with governments. And going to more formalized assessment, state is playing several roles. This is the lawmaker, the regulator, the strategist. That's the first function. Function number two is countries. Governments are quite large clients for businesses, and the amount of money countries spend for implementation of their interests is immense today. And number three, the state becomes a very large investor today. So client and investor, these roles are quite close to each other, and I will try to elaborate on that. So a country is a strategist. So I entered this room, and I remember 1 year ago we were sitting here discussing issues and points of new power, new energy with Mr. Chubais. Yesterday he was talking about the strategy 2020, and he said we failed it all. Well, is it right or wrong? This is probably a point of a different discussion, a subject of different discussion. But if we're talking about the digital world, I think the national project Digital Economy is a document of strategic planning, since it defined midterm goals and articulated how and through what means these goals can be achieved, and even created a unique instrument for implementation. The structure which is called, the body which is called the digital economy. This is a unique body, this mechanism. I should say it works quite effectively. At least business is playing a very important, probably the key role in defining specific goals and tasks and ways of implementing the goals and meeting the targets. Country state as a lawmaker. Well, we all want laws to be adopted faster. We have a lot of gaps in terms of regulation to be filled. I'm not going to talk about all of them now, but another function of the state as a regulator, quite strict role. Another role, country as a client. Countries spend a lot of money to create new products, new state information systems. If we're speaking about Rostelecom, we, according to the requests of the state, we're doing a lot. Of course, the state services portal is one of the largest projects here, and next to it are sitting another important technology, the single system of identification, the system for interdepartmental electronic exchange. And so over these years, very high-tech resources were created. On the portal of government services, state services, more than 100 million users are active. In other systems, millions of transactions every year. So the country proved to be quite up-to-date and relevant, and they are quite effective in goal setting for such projects, and they are working in public interests. And another not very typical role of a country is the role of investor. So the country has been investing a lot into creating modern high-tech infrastructure, first of all, for transmission of data, of information. So I'm speaking about giving access to the population, giving access to the internet, and also offering resources through this means. And President yesterday said that every person in this country should have an opportunity, almost free of charge, to have access to all socially important instruments to implement the laws according to which the country is obliged to provide such services for the people. Every year, the country spends from 10 to 15 billion rubles to develop such infrastructure. Russia is not the only country with such projects in the pipeline. but one of the leaders, obviously. We are working in a systemic way here and in a very structured way. And the most important thing is that the state does not try to create this infrastructure as part of departments or official bodies' balances, but they give this money to businesses, not only Rostelecom, but this year almost all operators became part of this type of work, and this is a very good instrument. This is a PPP kind of, because businesses do this type of work in a more effective way, and they support and maintain the infrastructure. And that's also quite good. What we all expect from the state in the future, of course, the key question here, and my colleague has already touched upon it, structuring and defining the rules of utilization of various types of information by businesses, information which is now sitting on the side of the state, or which emerges during the process of digitalization. Today, these approaches are operating in practice, and businesses use them, but they call for adopting rules for more effective going forward. And new ideas with digital profile are emerging for all of us, where the whole scope of information will be accumulated, and there are discussions on what rules and based on what principles this information can be utilized by businesses. My personal opinion is that, well, I think that all of us should have rights to dispose of this information, either to give it to the market or not. And in this sense, I think that the right thing to do is to be more conservative at the initial stages, at the beginning, and then get more and more liberal. Because being cautious and cautiousness of people, all of us, related to this information is there. Yes, we're cautious about giving out this information. So 2020, I think, is the year when these rules should be articulated. And that's where we will have a lot of discussions around, I expect, among experts. And when projects draft law comes to the Duma and the Council of the Federation, well, I think this work will start, and I'll invite you to be part of it. Thank you very much. Just a short question to follow up. A question I'm thinking about quite often. So such large companies, state-owned companies, in the modern economy, which is not in its best shape now, they are islands of stability, sort of. Obviously, business climate in Russia is not ideal, and the economic growth rates are not as high as we want them to be. State-owned companies have more resources than other companies, and the managers of state-owned companies have good managerial ambitions. I agree entirely. I read the strategy of your company, and I like it. If I'm in your position, I think I would think about the same things you are talking about. So it's not the task of the managers of such companies to limit their ambitions. But don't you think that there is a threat of the state sector becoming too large, including this digital industry? And who should limit your ambitions? You yourself, or we do not need to limit them at all, or we just give you an opportunity to develop. And since you are really successful and you have proper good business plans and the economy shows good results, so could you please elaborate on this? Should we limit the ambitions of managers of state-owned companies in structuring ecosystems, or we do not need such things? Or if yes, who should do that? If we are talking about Rostelecom, then Rostelecom is a public company. Our stocks are traded not only in Moscow, but in Frankfurt and London. From this point of view, we are not different We are no different comparing against other companies, public companies, and we as managers face the same tasks: TSR, ROI, profit, and other indicators that are relevant for us and relevant, for instance, for Gazprom Neft as well. Another thing is that due to historic specificities, large infrastructure, state-owned companies, not only Rostelecom, but Rosseti, for instance, Russian railways, have unique infrastructure. And this is the national heritage, the national value, and this is a strategic element for development of the country. So we all need roads, railroads, we need to produce oil and gas and transfer it, and we need to transfer information. That's why infrastructure is the most important element for development of the country. And so the country is setting infrastructure tasks for us, first of all. And that's why we are investing a lot. We are investing almost 30% of our revenue with this standard ratio of capex, 20%. We anyway invest around 30%, and I think this is mostly good for the society, for the country. This is not a bad thing to have, but from the point of view of shareholders, probably it might be more interesting to increase net profit and dividend flow, dividend stream. I think that's the only specificity that differentiates us from other companies, because the country, the state, sees that this is a source of development of infrastructure. In all other ways, we are thinking in the same manner as our colleagues in the private sector. Okay, thank you very much, Mikhail. Let's move on. Alexander Dukov, head of the board, Director General, Gazprom Neft. This company is one of the leaders in digitalization of production processes. Digitalization of production processes is a very complicated landscape, much more complicated than that of other sectors of the economy. And Gazprom Neft has a reputation of a very dynamic company in this area, one of the most dynamic not only in this country but across the world. They introduce a lot of modern things like machine learning for development of oil fields and so on. So this company is one of the leaders in this area. That's why, Alexander, the floor is yours. Could you please tell us, what do you expect from the state? How do you see the interaction between government and businesses? What goes wrong? What goes well? What are your expectations? Well, my colleagues in this panel have already mentioned the role the country should play in development and application of new digital technologies. Indeed, the government is a strategist, and the strategy for development of artificial intelligence was developed together with the state, and the state is the regulator, the client, the investor, and that's true. These are the roles and functions that are performed by the country, by the state. And yes, sometimes they're successful in this, sometimes not very much so. But what I would like to touch upon when speaking about the state as an investor, we should not only speak about investments into infrastructure, but investments into training for the specialists. This is also a very important area. That's what businesses need. Yes, of course, companies also take part in this process, but the role of the state is also important in the process. Speaking about the state as a client, indeed, this role is very important. And the role of the state as a client is important not only in orders for development of various platforms and products and services, but the role of the state is important as holder of a certain set of data sets. And actually, if these data sets are of high quality, then obviously offering such data sets, if the state is making them open and available for the wider audience, of course it will contribute to development of those platforms, services, and products we need.
And another comment, if the state plays the role of an investor and does not limit itself with building the structure of data transfer, then needless to say, it's very important that what is being created should be open source. And the community, the digital community, investment community, to have an access to those products and services and an opportunity to modify them, to fine-tune them, and use further on. Clear enough that something will not be able to be open, but it should be maximally open for the platforms and products the state creates. Speaking about our panel discussion topic, a very important word here is cooperation, because we are now trying to discuss about the responsibilities of the business and the state, and everyone should be dealing with his own chores. And we realize that both strategy development or regulatory activities or creating a demand, all those important areas should have not only business or the state operating. It is joint work. It should be joint work, and the state will be, if the state regulates without the business, then it is not very good. So it is the right thing to do to speak about cooperation, that because it's a joint work. And the main comment I think that I would like to make here is about the digital race. Speaking about this digital race, and the way I view it, and the tasks of the business and the objectives of the business and the state, it's not about digital races of platforms or cloud services. Indeed, that's all very important, platforms and cloud services, but I think we should talk about competition between ecosystems, of digital races of ecosystems, and it is extremely important to cooperate for the business and the state, for the ecosystem that's being created or is created and is developing, for it to be competitive and for it to be able to compete with ecosystems that are being created and developing in other countries. Countries or sometimes even cities, but that's the general trend, and we can observe it. And we all know that, and ecosystem, that's the word that was mentioned. Like Rostelecom, it's a set of specialists or companies, scientific, educational institutions, financial institutions. As a result of the interaction and opinion exchanges and joint work at projects, all participants of those ecosystems would enhance each other to lead it to the situation when every participant of the ecosystem with certain economic potential will be using the multiplier. That's called synergy. And the objective is for us to create and develop ecosystem. Of course, we can aim at some national company and pump in money, or, for instance, we can take Rostelecom and pump it all there. But we realize that if it is going to be standing apart, irrespective of how much money is pumped in it, this kind of organization in the competitive race will lose inevitably. And our objective of the business and the state is to develop the ecosystem. And we can see that in many countries, there are different approaches, of course, but development of those ecosystems becoming a part of state policy. Some choose export policy, like China did, and helping their companies to grow and to export their products, like Huawei, or it can be a model of import, and we can see parts of such ecosystem in the United States or Canada. They are fighting for specialists and experts of ecosystems in other countries. And that's part of their state policy, which is population growth, and it should not be due to migration, but qualitative growth. And they are attracting specialists who will be part of their innovative technological ecosystem. Through cheap mortgage, and there are a lot of other instruments that they can offer, different tax instruments they're using, and or high quality of life standards. Thus, they can import the elements of existing ecosystems and develop their own. And we are the witness of, and Yandex can confirm that, unfortunately, a number of companies, of Russian companies, that has become quite serious technological players in the market. They had Russian jurisdiction, and now they've changed it. And the decision is made in this territory. And I think we should think of not only categories of cloud services, but and how to develop them. We should reflect on how to develop ecosystem here. And there's no universal or simple solution here. It's a set of measures and events, and both from the business and the state. And since all the previous speakers were trying to use expressive metaphors, and in physics there's such a notion as a system with feedback. That's the system with the feedback, and the quality is determined by the positive feedback, because feedback can be positive and negative, and positive feedback of such innovative ecosystems is determined by the demand, which is a very important factor for development of new technologies. And it was advanced and also technology advancing. So respectively, when those two parts will work in advance, supporting each other, the system is going to grow. And the role of the state, and when we deal with a system, always there are some frictions in systems and loss of some energy. So the objective of the state is to provide, well, yes, business is in charge of making up demand. The business mostly creates products and solutions, but the role of the state, of course, is very important because it is involved in the process. And the main role, I think, is to provide the minimization of those frictions and not to lose things in the system. Talking about the objective or the assignment of the cooperation, we think that the main one here is to develop the ecosystem, which would be competitive. Thank you. Thank you very much for such a great answer. Substantial. So Aysen Nikolaev, head of Sakha-Yakutia Republic. So the Republic has quite ambitious goals in this digital race, while the entities of federation also are competing. So I think that I guess that Saha-Yakutia has a task to be leading by 2024 in digital development. ISEN, how justified are those ambitions, and what is it based? Are they based on, and how do you proceed in the direction of such a complicated and ambitious goal? Good morning, friends. We are reflecting about the title of our session. Well, I am attracted mostly by the word digital race. Well, to participate in it, and you have to first understand where to go, and you have to create an infrastructure. And before the end of 2012, we didn't have it. We didn't have villages with fiber optic, and only in December 31st we introduced it, and to start thus started the new digital area. Now we have 8,600 of kilometers and 1,600 built in the recent couple of years, thanks to Rostelecom, which is our partner in not only in major cities but also in villages and towns. And we do have some of the districts with 85% of Yakutian population does have an access to such communications. So thus we've proceeded in digitalization, and in very remote villages residents can order things by internet, or in developing their own startups, promoting them. So, and that's all very serious now. I think that here such a good cooperation of the state and the business allowed us to build this kind of infrastructure. And now we've went beyond polar circle with Rostelecom, with our municipal districts. We are building and constructing about 500 kilometers of the line. And at the end of the year, we will have the fiber optic line beyond the polar circle, coming closer to the polar ocean, the Northern Ocean. And this is very interesting for our diamond and oil and gas companies, which are exploring in those regions. Of course, fiber optic allowed us to create an absolutely new industry in the Republic, which is IT. And quite recently, people were just laughing at the Yakutian IT business. They were laughing, saying, "Where's IT? Where's IT? And where's Yakutia?" Mostly diamonds were associated with us. But last December, in 2018, we opened an IT park in Yakutsk with 10,000 square meters. I was desperately criticized by our stakeholders. They were saying that no one will come there to work, and why ISEN is doing it, just playing with toys. Now I can say that we have 110 companies as residents of the park, which is the biggest in the Far East, and we are dominating in the IT services market. Far East, 75% of export of IT services comes from Yakutia, from our companies, and some of our companies, unfortunately or fortunately, have grown so much, and they are doing business all over the world. You might use this taxi service, internet service, and we correct me if I'm wrong, we are number 4 of 5 after Uber, Yandex, Taxi. And their capitalization now is hundreds of millions of dollars minimum. And of course, the operational business mostly doing things in the United States. But the center of technological developments and competence still is in Yakutia. And there are other companies developing games. And I've just recently told it to the president of the country that very few people are aware of it. but the Apple devices all have Yakutian games. That's fantastic, but that's quite serious achievement of our IT industry in Russia. The company is very young, grown up recently and in our parks. Well, it was not IT, but lawyers who had created the company. They are fond of IT. And we have 110, as I said, companies there. And we planning to come up to very serious volumes for the IT industry to cover maybe not as big a position as diamond industry, but if we have 1,500 people working there by 2024, our ambition is to have 10,000. Of course, we require from the states, well, we are not interfering into their activities. What they request from us is staff, personnel, which is quite a serious problem in the country. And I faced it now that we can see that specialists, I mean, mathematicians, IT technologists, our universities prepare, which is there are just very few of them because many of them leave for abroad and or Moscow. And in Yakutsk, we have a very serious mathematical school, federal school in the university. And thanks to that, about 200 people every year, we have such graduates, which are very much in demand in the industry. And we are negotiating now with Sberbank for the School 21, which they opened in Moscow, and Kazan, St. Petersburg, maybe for it to be represented not only in the cities with 1 million population, but maybe for us also. That's where we can promote it. Speaking about cooperation of the state and the business, I think that we should distribute these things, and we should understand what the state needs and what the business needs. And I think that the state is the main, providing tax preferences. And we met yesterday here with the governors, discussed it about innovative regions. And this year, the tax grace regimes for IT companies will expire. And we realized that if we don't make some new longer-term solutions for the IT companies, then they will just leave for Belarus or even farther on. And it's clear enough that IT companies, they or China or whatever. Well, and of course, those grace periods, especially in single social tax and physical income tax, and we need it badly, and that's important. And the new government, I think, in the near future should review the initiatives because we shouldn't drag it, especially knowing our decision-making mechanism. I think that we should not drag it because the implications and consequences can be grave for the industry. And I think that if such cooperation is created with very clear-cut role distributions, that would be good because we in Yakutia now created a portal of Yakutia. Now it is already operating. And being the mayor of Yakutsk, I started to do it, but it's different now. It's similar to active citizen in Moscow. And for the first time in the country, we included the environmental issues, and we want our citizens to be involved in their territories to discuss it because we have more than 3 million square kilometers. The supervision body authorities cannot cover it all. So it's very important to react to emergencies like technogenic failures that might crop up in the region. And the portal also will select the eco projects from private business, and through our venture fund, we will be able to finance them to help them join the accelerator programs, the programs related to the business in ecological, for them to operate in the Republic. And I support this idea about ecosystems. The most important thing is to have the good rules of the games, very clear cut, and the tax regime for IT companies and I think that both SME business and big business can place us in the position of the leaders of the world. Thank you. Well, we all know such a term, smart home. In Yakutia now we have digital chum, which is their national home. Well, I would like to add only to the Yakutia. Well, producing industries, I wouldn't split the economy into producing and digital industries, because our Gazprom Neft colleagues shows that and their experience shows that they can be no less digital than other initially very digital companies. So we wish our colleagues in Yakutia to achieve their ambitious goals. And let's move on. Andrei Nikitin, governor of Novgorodsky region. Andrei used to have experience, federal experience in digitalization as the head of the Agency of Strategic Initiatives. And then now he has experience working in quite a difficult region. What's your view about the cooperation of the state and the business? What's the difference? What's new about that? What new aspects of sight maybe you already have in your almost new position? Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Again, I will start with the topic as to why cooperation is needed in the first place. Because why do we need it at all? In my perspective, speaking regionally, there are two problems. Why the state, the region, well, I'm talking about the region. Why the state needs a cooperation with the business in digital race? The first issue is a very interesting phenomenon, because very often a poor region pays more expensive for some things than a rich region does. Well, I will quote an example of one of our projects. Since the school didn't have digital control of their energy resources, they paid 15% more for their communal services, for heating, for gas.
So not very rich Novgorod region school paid plus 15% for all those services. When implementing the digital project, now we can save up to 100 million in this. This money can be spent on schools' needs, not to just give this money away. And another point is inequality. For regions with complicated socioeconomic situation, critically different levels of education in the center of the region and remote location schools, and critically different level of healthcare comparing central cities against remote locations facilities. This problem can be overcome only through digitalization. And here I can give you an example of projects we are doing together with Yandex, Yandex Lyceum, Yandex School, and other projects. This allows children from remote location schools to have access to high level of education. And that's why this cooperation is interesting for us. We want to overcome inefficiencies and inequality, and also eliminating the inequality in terms of access to healthcare and education and other services. What we offered to businesses in 2017, we together with the Russian venture company, Agency for Strategic Initiatives, and the Fund for Development of Internet Initiatives in Skolkovo, we created the Factory for Piloting Projects, the National Technological Initiative. This is a structure inside the Novgorod University, a structure within the Novgorod region government that allows us to attract startups from all over the country, startups that are interested in working with the state. We tell them, come to us, and we, in a very friendly manner, we will try and implement your ideas in this region, and we'll try and find economically win-win relations model, interaction model. Those guys who create such IT projects sometimes do not really know how to work with officials and with regulation on regional and federal levels. And we assist them with this. We just go through one stage to another. And the statistics today is as follows. About 50 or less projects went through us, and 1/3 of them stayed with us and is implementing their projects in full-fledged scale in the region. 1/3, well, we like them, but due to various reasons, for instance, the implementation process should be different or they need a larger region, we articulated the scheme of interaction with the authorities for them, and they went further with our recommendations, and another third was not ready or not relevant for implementation on the regional level. So through this project, through the piloting factory, we got access to all interesting startups in regional level across the country. And this allows us to go a bit faster than our neighbors, and it allows us to get access to the most interesting and the smartest solutions for the benefit of the people of our region. So this approach is 2.5 years old, and we see that it is quite effective. And now we're going to the next stage. With some of startups, we start negotiations to be landed in the Novgorod region and offer solutions. We say if we work so effectively, why not working in constant cooperation format, opening a platform, a space in the territory of the region. And I agree with what Aysen says. From the point of view of the tax policy and from the point of view of talents, the challenges are the same, and we work on them together. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I think we have some time to go to our experts with some questions. I'm interested in one of the points we touched upon, but not very deeply, not very thoroughly. How important it is in this digital race to support specific level of competition in all these markets and creating a nurturing environment. I would like to start with Tigran. He was on both sides at a period of time. So we remember when Yandex went against Google, went to courts in the anti-monopoly court and received positive judgment in Moscow and Istanbul, and the competition at that time conditions were not fair. They got better after their activities. But Yandex, as a large company, from its side, it is also dominating sometimes in some areas, and there are claims against them saying that they are distorting the competition in the market. How can we maintain proper level of competition in the digital economy, and what can we expect from the state? I would like to tell you a story about competition. It is often said that competition is good as a motto. Everyone believes this. But the colleague was right saying that competition is very good when it is somewhere else. But when you are competing against someone, well, for you it's better always not to have competitors. It's easier not to have competitors. About 7 years ago, Yandex tried to go to the Turkish market and build a search engine business, search service. Unfortunately, this story was not a success. But in search engines systems across the world, the quality of search is measured very precisely. People can sit down and compare one search engine against the other. There is a methodology that can compare expectations of people and the relevance of the results of search. So before going to the market, we measured Google search quality in Turkey, and we identified that Google more than by more than 20% less quality search results in Turkey compared against Russia or the United States. These measurements were very accurate. And the reason was very simple. In the American market and the Russian market and other markets, Google had competitors, or in the domestic market, they understand what happens and their employees use the service. But in the market without a competitor, Turkey, the quality of service was much worse. And that's the value we sometimes underestimate as users. Using such basic thing here in Russia as a search engine, well, sometimes some people use this, some people use that. It looks like there is no difference, but no competition worsens the quality very much. And people who live in a country without competition in this area do not know that they are using a service that is lower in terms of quality indicators. So this is just something to the point of competition. Yes, we're all competing against other large companies and smaller companies and other ecosystems. From the other side, on the other side, Yandex is a platform. Platform is a type of business that sits somewhere in the middle, in between users, consumers, and many other businesses. Yandex platform in search, in taxi, Yandex's platform in e-commerce, in news. And here, the large task which is relevant today is to maintain this thin layer or border to stay attractive as a business and pay salaries and retain good specialists, and at the same time to stay as a platform. You can be a platform if you are neutral, if you do not offer any preferences, if the rules of the game are transparent. If someone has preferences, there should be an algorithm of how to get them. So full transparency is very important to maintain this balance. And we face these challenges in all industries we work in over 20 years period of our operations, starting from search engine, where there is competition between websites and players. There are our own services that can also give relevant answers to questions, and creating the methodology of decision making on what service, on how to stay as a platform with your own services it is a challenge indeed. And one of the cases how we tackle this problem, competition of Yandex own in-house services against other services. Here, this is a real problem. We need to know how to tackle it internally. And the main instrument of tackling it is users' metrics. We create various users' metrics, indicators that are measuring for each search how competitive this service is comparing against others, this or that service. And in this race, services of Yandex are competing against each other. So the number one will be the one who is offering best services. So this is a continuous work, and it'll be optimized. It'll always be in the process of optimization, but you cannot go without that. You need to limit yourself. You need to set up methodologies and procedures and principles inside, and the Constitution, which should not be violated, to work as a platform. In other In other case, company cannot work as a platform because it loses trust of its partners. Thank you. Thank you, Tigran. Mikhail, your company is also being a large company in some segments. It is dominating, and that's quite logical. From the other hand, providing access to a wider audience, the company is contributing to development of competition. How do you see on the state side what should be done to maintain proper level of competition in the digital economy? Well, a couple of words about Rostelecom first. We are a completely market company. 85% is earned in the open market services for people, for companies, for operators, and 15% is what we earn from various projects. And many of them, by the way, are competitive projects with the state. In general, I think our market looks quite mature. And if we take as a criteria of maturity our tariffs, they are transparent, everyone are aware of them. They are very competitive. Access to internet is very cheap in Russia, and our conditions are very good in terms of traffic, and we are absolutely competitive in it. But there are areas that call for more attention of the state. For instance, the discussion about Yarovaya law faded. Well, it is called this way, but officially it is a different law. We lived 1 year. I mean, the operators for whom it was a relevant document. It is an unusual example of interaction of state and businesses. You know, state wants to ensure safety of and security of the country, and the thing is that the infrastructure is created through businesses, not through the budget funds. And at the starting point of the project and when developing the criteria, we had a discussion on how much in creating this infrastructure, how much companies should participate, those in OTT segment, over-the-top companies, because the volume of video content and other types of information is growing very, very fast, and that's the main driver of growing costs. So I think the model that exists today is unfair. There are various approaches, and we, for instance, offered an opportunity to an idea of going away from network neutrality. Another approach is implementing special payments from which you can articulate a special fund and then subsidize and create infrastructure. In this part, I think the state is distorting the situation and its understanding. So we need to make this area a fairer place. Thank you very much. I would like to move on the regional level. In your republic, in your region, do you feel any challenges in terms of competition, or you are at a different stage of development now, or you feel it as a separate problem and you work on it specifically? When speaking about infrastructure, I think that competition in fiber optics actually allowed us to reduce tariffs. In the city of Yakutsk, we have Transtelecom and Rostelecom, and this means drop of tariffs, and they're absolutely competitive now. In other areas where there is no competition, the prices are higher, but we understand that when Rostelecom is setting the fiber optic lines for remote locations of 300, 200 people, of course, we need to support them in this. initiatives. Inside the company, I understand you have special subsidies programs for such projects. Talking about the environment, we are now growing very actively. The market, we were articulating IT service for Yakutia, not for internal use mostly, but for export. We are competing on the global level, on the global market. Our companies, gaming companies, development and creating games, they are competing in the global level. The competition is tough, and we see that there are real results of such activities. So this model is not for just internal use. We are working outside. The global market is a quickly growing market, a competitive market. That's why in this part we do not have any serious challenges or problems. Thank you very much. Andrei, on the level of your region, how do you view the competition environment, lack of competition, or does the federal center, should it do anything to stimulate, to improve situation? Well, we see lack of competition but the reason is not a large not a large scope of the market. So the factory of piloting projects allows us to bring companies into the region, companies that start competing against each other. But from the point of view of infrastructure, we are in the center of the country. We are at the crossroads of the two largest megapolises. Colleagues from Rostelecom are working very actively in the region. Thank you very much for that. And this year, a federal tender for fiber optics to various remote social facilities. Megafon won the tender. It was not our tender, but the Ministry of Digitalization. But it is interesting what the results will be. I think we do not have this problem, actually, in the Novgorod region, at least. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that we should, step by step, start closing this session. Well, this message says that at a meeting in the State Duma, Mikhail Mishustin said that the digital economy will be among top priorities. So things we're discussing here today, I hope, will stay relevant for the future government of Russia and will stay as a priority in its agenda. Today we covered, thanks to our very interesting prominent speakers, covered many problems. What the government should do, what businesses should do. Probably we haven't covered the full agenda of the day because there are things that should be done by the state only. For instance, providing cybersecurity, ensuring cybersecurity because they need to develop standards and implement specific measures. But we say that the government should ensure competition and create conditions for fair competition. Digital economy cannot be built through efforts of a small number of companies, but the environment should be nurturing for the process. We also need some changes in the regulation, and I'd say that we need to create, roughly speaking, conditions where Russian jurisdiction is super comfortable for digital businesses. That's when we can have good chances to be successful in this digital race. We have obvious problems with quality of business climate, and we have a lot of other problems. So we need to compensate, offset them through creating super comfortable environment for digital economy, and that's when we can feel the results, see the real business results. And this is, of course, should be embodied in cooperation between the government and businesses. We need to find forms of cooperation. We need to make our environment the most comfortable for the digital economy. We also spoke about the following. So the government is influencing this market, being a large customer of it, and through forming demand, it also impacts development of various standards because being a client, they set the standards. We also said that we need specific tax benefits stimulating the digital economy. And we said a lot about, they speak a lot about reduction of insurance payments if it is relevant for any industry where human capital is important. We also mentioned the point of the necessity to train talents and investments, ensure investments into education. This is a general task of the state and businesses. Mostly, this is the role of the state when we are talking about schools and universities. But I should say that almost all large companies represented here in this panel today anyway invest in various forms, invest into education. Tigran, for instance, sitting next to me, can prove that Yandex has special educating program, School of Analysis of Data. Yandex has a lot of training programs, but the School of Analysis of Data is the top program of their education agenda, and this is one of the best programs in the world in machine learning and big data. It looks like it is better than similar programs in the best universities of the world.
And the state also should go its way to support the high level of mathematics in the schools and the rest, and investment into fundamental research, plus supporting and providing the link between education, fundamental research, and major companies, the way it is done in developed jurisdictions. Well, possibly the state can also provide support of entering the external markets. It is very important for SME business. Sometimes they can do it themselves, but still they need the support of the state for IT and digital business to promote themselves into the external markets, because this support would be very useful for them. And we know many countries are quite active and more successfully doing it than us. And this is what we also should do. Maybe it is not an exhaustive list of issues where the state and the business should cooperate to be successful in digital race, but I think that we've covered quite a big chunk of it in our today's discussion. And I think we now have time, just 5 minutes left for questions. Please ask some targeted questions and not about the new government of Russian Federation, but about what we were discussing here. Good morning. Viktor Haikov, President of National Association of Oil and Gas Industries. And I would like to, of course, ask a question to Alexander Dukov because he represents our industry. But I will ask Michael Osievsky, head of Rostelecom and the head of Digital Committee of Industrials Union. What are the key challenges in the coming 5 years? Does Rostelecom see for itself as a major company representing digital companies in the framework of global digital race, not in Russia, but I mean coming to the international markets? And what is the role of the state here? Because we are talking about cooperation of the business and the state. What are the challenges in the long run? And what's the role of Rostelecom in solving them? Thank you. Well, a big and complicated question, and in 2 minutes I can give you only a brief answer. Speaking about the domestic market, needless to say, the main risks here are linked to the activity of the global companies. I mean, all of us, it's relevant for all of us operating in the market. And the Yarovaya law and the conditions and competition should be equal for all. Nevertheless, the Russian market is quite mature, and we have a lot of our own products and solutions, and we have our own experts, and this competition will be bright and vivid, I'm sure, and we don't see any serious global shocks for Russian companies. Speaking about opportunities for the Russian business to come out to bigger markets, there's very little experience like that. There are a lot of objective and subjective reasons for that. Talking about our segment, data information storage, which is actively developing in the world. Of course, they are afraid of us because everybody's trying to store information in their own territories, and the digital sovereignty is in the heads of politicians of all the countries and business managers. Nevertheless, that's the dynamics we can see in our subsidiary, which is engaged in developing information security products. Won an open tender of Singapore Airlines, and we provided and supplied our software there. So we should do it, but that's a very difficult way to go, and it's a very long way. Thank you very much. Thank you. You, please. Good morning. My name is Georgi Bagdasaryan. I'm 23, student of Kosygin University. It's a second course of master degree. So I'm very thankful to Mr. Nikitin and Mr. Nikolaev for what they're doing for our colleagues in startups in IT. Because indeed, that requires applause from the audience. And my question is about legislative activities and what they do for us. 18 months ago, I set up a startup with 150,000 Russian rubles. We are one of the fastest growing company in the segment. But I have an issue. I'm sure every startupper faces in IT, which is security, because last year our website was hacked by 2 to 3 times by competitors. And when we are talking about competitive market, we realize that some resorting to very negative ways of influencing somebody else's capital. So if there were an opportunity to possibly together with our colleagues, with legislators, to lobby draft law to mitigate the risks in technology hacking. Why so? Because our website is one of the biggest in tourist business today in the startup sphere. And so thank you very much. Yes, the question is clear. Well, it's a great website. Thank you very much. But let's sort of cut off some advertisements. Well, maybe it doesn't even require the answer from the panelists. Well, we have to combat crime in cyberspace, and the state and the business should be doing it. Yes, that's fair enough. You have to be protected from criminals. Well, Rostelecom has a cloud solution for information security, and you can address our office. Well, here is the solution for you. We have several microphones. Chairman of the Sports Policies Committee. My question is, what should the state do for Yandex to bring its jurisdiction back to Russia? So that's just a question. Maybe something like a bargaining aspect. Well, thank you very much. Clear enough. I will try to answer about the essence of your question. Well, I think there are 2 components. First of all, Yandex de facto is a Russian company. And the majority, I think 99% of our employees, maybe less, are operating in Russia and based in Russia, in Moscow, Russian Moscow office. And the taxes are paid in Russia. And we even once counted then in 3 hours, Yandex is paying as many taxes as they pay during the year in the Netherlands. That's number one. Number two, Yandex competes happily or unhappily with global players in two fields simultaneously. On the one hand, you know that the search part of Yandex is 56%. The rest, 40+% is covered by Google, and they have many more developers operating in Silicon Valley, very highly qualified people, and so it's tenfold capacities. But we compete with Google in products and with the staff, with Facebook, with Microsoft, and along with this, it so happened that a talented developer doesn't even have to speak English or doesn't speak at all. He will be taken and loaded and brought to Silicon Valley for a very high salary. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, because in Russia there's a very good mathematical schools and very good engineers. And actually Yandex competes with this in the labor market, partially internationally too. And today Yandex is losing lots of people a year who relocate. I mean, especially top 300 people who relocate to other countries for very high salaries. And Yandex has to get people back who even already obtained foreign citizenship because they acquired experience in those companies, and it is very important locally. To compete salary-wise, Yandex needs capital and have an opportunity to raise capital. And one of the instruments which is used in the world is being present in exchanges, in stock exchanges. The companies which are operating there, like Rostelecom and Gazpromneft, they do have this opportunity to pay salaries not only from their own cash flows, but from equities, their equities. And it so happens in the world, and we talked about jurisdictions. So for joint stock companies, for stock exchanges with high liquidity, the Russian legislation either is not applicable or unacceptable, and actually the only reason Yandex has Dutch jurisdiction is because of this necessity to be a public company, for the company's shares to be listed on and traded on NASDAQ. Well, I can continue, but well, I can give you examples. Well, I'm sure there are a lot of experts here there's such a notion as liquidity of shares. It's volumes of trading per each equity, and you can compare Russian IT companies traded and listed in NASDAQ and other stock exchanges. For instance, in London, the exchange, their conditions are softer. So the liquidity of Yandex a day is 10, 20 times higher than others. So there are good exchanges with good investors, a lot of money. Well, though, this is what we were discussing during our session. Thank you very much for your question. So I think we are sort of pressed for time. Last couple of questions, and we will finish because, dear colleagues, thank you very much for this discussion. It's a proposal, not a question, for Rostelecom and Yakutia and Yandex. we've developed a digital breakthrough program. And if you want, we can give it to you. Very simple. U.S. companies, Yandex. Well, sorry, we don't have time. So it's time for questions and not for proposals. Sorry, that's a different genre. So people are leaving the premises. So while we're still here, we would like to say thank you to our interesting speakers and to say thank you. And then I would like to say thank you for our listeners for listening. Thank you very much.